Hey, everybody. Good morning and welcome to the Drummergy Podcast. I'm your host, Fred Rockfisher. It's episode 120, and today I have with me my great drummer friend, fellow educator, and mentor for me, Mr. James Harrison, all the way from Virginia. Is it Virginia, or are you in West Virginia, James?
It's Virginia.
Okay. You're East.
Cheers, everybody.
Man, welcome to the show. You've been participating with me in these for about 2 years, like pretty faithfully, and weighing in. You have so much great knowledge and perspectives on drumming and different styles of drumming and equipment. And you're the one guy in my life that seems to know everything about every piece of gear that has been and is being used. And so I want to get into some of that. But today is April 1st. No fooling. And James and I were talking before I hit go live. And we're like, you can't believe anything that you read today on the internet. There's no truth to be found today, except on this show, right?
Well, that remains to be seen.
So I don't mind being a prankster, a joker, somebody who likes to mess with people just a little bit. Are you kind of that way too?
Oh, definitely, especially on stage. Yeah.
What do you have any like real significant one that sticks out in your mind? Like you pulled a prank on somebody and
I had one that backfired on me.
Okay, so, tell me about that.
Well, one of the notorious things I would do would be to reach over and detune the bass player's knobs, or sometimes the guitarist or whatever. And then they would come up and they had, on the break, they might tune their instrument, then put it back down, go have a drink and come back. And then it would be out of tune and everything. And there's a guy named Ben Burdick. I'm sure you remember Ben,
yes.
Guitarist, excellent musician. And we were playing in a band together called the Pranksters of all, right? And, with Ansel Schoenberg and Shannon Mayhew and John Loffenberger and Ben. Anyway, we were playing at a club there in Boise, and I kept reaching back and hitting a knob or a mute button on Ben's amp because it was right next to the drums. And his guitar kept going out, and he thought he had a short or something. And so I just kept messing with it. And then I think Sandon told him, because I was always messing with John and, doing stuff to the microphone. I would put pepper on the microphone, so he'd go up and stuff like that. And anyway, like the next night I was doing something as Boise State, we had a game, so I had to rush over to do the performance. It was at Graney's, and I ran in and basically ran straight on stage, and Ben had detuned every single drum and put Vaseline on my sticks, and I mean everything you can imagine. I'm like trying to wet the sticks, and I start playing, and every drum is detuned, and I'm trying to. I mean that one he got me back on that.
Yeah.
So I kind of learned who to mess with and who not to mess with, and Ben was one of those guys you didn't mess with.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Scott, your guest last week or 2 weeks ago, Scott, you can mess with.
Oh yeah. So when I don't know, it was probably been like 5 or 6 years ago now that we had the big eclipse, and a lot of people went up into the mountains to have a great view. And I was playing with a band with Scott at the top of I can't remember the name of the ski place in Sun Valley, the top of Baldy or whatever it's called. I don't know. I do not know about skiing.
Right.
Although that we were there at the top, and we were riding this gondola up there that seemed like it went forever, and it was kind of this enclosure. And I was reading the warning signs on the label, like don't put your hands out the window, don't put your skis out the window, remain seated at all times. And I was just reading very calmly right through, and without a pause, I just said, this gondola may occasionally become disconnected from the cable. And Scott goes, it doesn't say that. He got all panicky. Chris McCall is here. He says, Fred, you should tell your Prince story. Okay, I could tell that really fast, but I want to get to James. So, you said you can't believe everything that you read on the internet, especially on April Fools. And it was 9 years ago. I looked that up this morning. I had put a very just short post that said, I've had to keep this secret, but now I can finally tell you that in the last 6 months, I've hired a personal career manager. And on Saturday, I'm leaving to Minneapolis to Paisley Park Studios, and I'm one of 3 drummers that has an audition with Prince. And my Facebook page just blew up with all these people congratulating me. There were very few that got that it was an April Fool's prank. So then I had to make an apology post later.
I remember that.
So
I think I could read between the lines on that one because I actually knew the drummer for Prince. So.
Was that Hannah Welton or?
Yeah.
That's when he had that Third Eye Girl band, I think.
Yeah.
Well,
that was under wraps for a while too. That project before it came forward.
Yeah.
If he still had his, was it the Power Generation? And then he had a
New
Third Eye.
Yeah. There was like
Something
Power
like
Generation and New Power Generation, and I don't know. There was several iterations of.
Well, as we kick this off, I'm gonna support you a little bit here, Fred.
Oh, there we go! Yay! Now, if I had one of those little tracks with people cheering and clapping.
My Fred Rock School of Music hat there.
You look good in that.
Well, thanks. I had to bend it a little bit. I can't do that street thing. Like I'm too old for that.
Oh yeah. Well, this is me hanging on to youth, I think.
Okay.
So, I of course know so much of your story and so much of what you've done, but not everybody knows. So, what was the one moment in your life that you said, I got to play the drums? Like there was something that drew you to that made you fall in love with it. Like how old were you when that happened? What was the thing? I know so I'm like in my early 50s, and for so many people of my age, it was Kiss was the one thing that, when you opened up Kiss Alive 2 and saw that huge poster, so many people just said, I have to be involved with that. What was the thing for you?
A neighbor, believe it or not. I lived in Detroit when I was a kid. I was born in Chicago, but my family moved to Detroit when I was 3. And we had a neighbor. I remember their last name was Copeland. And they had 2 sons. And the older son was in band. And he had a snare drum. And he'd be in the backyard on the snare drum playing it all the time. And I was just like mesmerized that I wanted to do that. And he let me play it a few times. And that was to me, the thing I remember. It wasn't like a band or anything like that. It was that. And then it just kind of snowballed from there, But I remember specifically was a neighbor having a drum.
Oh, cool. How old were you?
That's a very condensed story, obviously, but
sure.
Oh gosh. Very, very young. 5, 6.
Okay. Cool. What was there anybody else in your family that was involved with music, or just the neighbor's influence that?
My sister eventually played the flute, but nobody else. They were all into hunting and fishing and all that kind of stuff, and carpentry.
Uh-huh.
My brothers were twins and a year older than I was, but my family got us musical instruments when we were kids, and they got 2 guitars, a toy drum set, and a little tiny organ. And my sister stood at the organ hitting buttons. She didn't know what she was doing or anything. And
yeah,
she's 3 years younger than me. And then my brothers are twins, but one of them was left-handed and one was right-handed. They're identical twins other than that. And so the left-handed one, because the guitar was backwards, he went over and took the drums, and I was mad because I wanted the drums, and they made me take the guitar. And so every time that he wasn't around, I would play on the drums. And I've ended up, it was one of those, they were made of metal, and I broke all the heads because they were kind of paperish,
Yeah. Yeah.
and a little tin can top for a cymbal and all that. And so, I mean, and I had a cousin too that played drums that was older. So if we went over to their house for anything, if you went upstairs, he had a whole drum set. So it was just like it wasn't like a band. It was like people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
So
just couldn't. It was it. It was it. That was it. I'm going to be a drummer.
nice. So most kids want to be firemen or policemen or something like that, and you wanted to be a drummer, as did I.
A drummer. And oddly enough, people will laugh at me. At one point, I thought about being a professional wrestler, but we'll get into that another time.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. That was in college.
Uh-huh. So the neighbor got kind of put that bug in your life to get started drumming, and so I'm assuming you got involved with school band.
I did eventually. My parents got divorced, and we moved to Kentucky, where I grew up for the most part. And my grandparents were super supportive. And here's they bought my brother's BB guns, and they bought me a drum.
Oh,
and it had 3 pieces of wood that made a stand, and a little drum with a tom off to the side and a cymbal. And I broke it by playing so much. And then they ordered a drum from Sears, the old catalog. You know how grandparents are.
yeah.
Sears.
Oh yeah.
And then I broke that. And then it was like, obviously this kid wants to play the drums. So I got my first real snare drum, which was a Slingerland Gene Krupa, which I wish I still had. But and I started taking lessons, and I was probably just in the summer of like 4th grade.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, so many of us have similar stories where we start out on something that's a toy, and to where our parents or somebody in our life goes, there might be more going on here than just this piece of plastic. And so just in school there's jazz band and concert band and marching band. Did you have a preference of any of those, or were you just like, it involved music and involved drums, I was in?
I mean, when I was a kid, I always saw the parades and wanted to be doing that too. I was very fortunate to be in the Murray, Kentucky school system, and had they got new directors, and they ended up being a very, very, very strong band program, which actually won the national championship in 1977. The marching bands, what do they call it, BOA. And so you started band in 6th grade, but I had already been taking lessons for a year and a half or so. So I was advanced compared to a lot of the other drummers and whatnot. But so I participated in all of it: concert band, marching band, and drum set. Of course, being the drummer, marching band and drum set had more of an appeal to me than concert band, because I was counting a lot, resting to get up and hit something, versus playing all the time. And for my first 6 months of lessons, I had one teacher who owned the music store, great jazz drummer, master on brushes. That's why I love brush playing so much. And but for 6 months, I didn't do anything but snare drum. I wasn't even allowed to touch a drum set. And then they let me go on, and I started taking from one of his students, who he also taught at the college, Murray State, and then started taking from one of his students, a guy named Mike Ryan. And I got into the drum set, and like a lot of people of that era, went through the Carmine Appice Realistic Rock book, and the Rock and Bass Drum book one. Is it John Lombardi? And anyway, all these things, and got into that in addition to band. So I kind of always say that I had one foot in the band world and one foot in the rock and roll world, you know what I mean? Or the jazz world. I did participate in jazz band. I was a huge big band fan because my first teacher was a big band guys. So Buddy Rich was it for me. Buddy Rich, Gene Krupa, and then I mean, you talk about influence. The Beatles cartoon was an influence,
Oh wow.
because I would watch the cartoon of Ringo. So, and then my aunt had a Beatles album, and I took it and started listening to it. And my grandmother had a restaurant and had a jukebox, so I would take the 45s from the jukebox and anything that was remotely rock. I mean, Elvis, the Beach Boys. It was mostly country music, but Everly Brothers and CCR. I would take those 45s and then I would put on headphones, the old coil ones, and
Yeah.
put those 45s on and try to learn the song. So that's what I was doing, opposite of my lessons.
Yeah.
Trying to play it by ear.
So a little side note on you spent so much time listening to records and trying to figure out what you were hearing and then emulating that. We didn't, and same with me when I was growing up learning to play the drums. I would just put on the radio and I would just play to whatever came on until a commercial came, and then I would just move the dial and I would start playing again. We didn't have the advantage of YouTube and drum covers and tutorials and somebody showing you like every single little exact nuance that some drummer
you're
did.
doing that. You're doing that wrong. He does it with his left hand.
Exactly.
I didn't see that back then.
No. I mean, if you were just listening to Led Zeppelin, would you know? Oh, John Bonham started that with his left hand or with his right? You would
because
never.
I didn't do that.
Right.
Because I played in bands and we tried to do those songs and I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was confused.
Yeah, you just do your best to try to replicate what we were hearing. And
I used to try to steal Buddy Rich licks, and literally would people won't know this, but an album is 33 RPMs. And 45. So they had speeds on the turntables.
Yeah.
So you had 78, 45, 33, and 16. So an album was 33. I would put it down to 16 so it would play slower to try to hear some of the drum licks.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Yeah. Do you so you've been a teacher and an educator for decades. Do you feel like that's something that's missing in learning instruments, is just relying on your ears to figure out what's going on?
I'm going to say sound old when I say this, but yes, because I think people hear with their eyes now. But I think it's in not just learning. I think it's in recording. I think it's in everything. You used to go record in a studio or play a jingle or something like that. And then they go, oh, let's go into the booth and listen to that. And you would sit there and listen. And they go, oh, can you go back in and punch in this and do this? Now they go, let's go in there. And they pull up a screen and they're looking at it. And they go, okay, this snare hit is not quite as loud as this one. So let's just replace that with this one. Let's replace them all. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's become a visual form of everything.
So
and so I always, like in teaching, and you do this a lot, I'm assuming you do this, I would always tell students, record yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But the first time I don't care if you do it with a video camera, now we all do it with a phone.
Right. Yeah.
Record yourself. But turn the phone away and just listen.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, And I always used to relate it to, if you go to a concert and you see all these bells and whistles and the smoke's going up and the explosions, and you go, oh my God, that was the best concert I ever saw. And then you heard a recording of that concert without all that. You tend to focus on the music. You might go, boy, it seemed like so good that night, So I always try to get people to listen first. And then once you do that, then you could turn the phone around and watch. And then, but when you're watching, watch. When you're listening, listen. And do anything that's going to help you. But I think we become so reliant on the video format for everything. That's just me.
No, and I agree. I would surmise that our teaching styles are probably pretty similar, just considering the success that we have as teachers. That I make sure everybody can read and have a really good understanding of rhythms and what they're looking at. I think that's a really, really important thing. Not that I want them to be staring at charts when they go and play or anything like that, but I just think having a deeper understanding of the instrument. But when it comes to learning songs, I'll tell them, based on the knowledge that you have now, I want you to figure out what is doing to the best of your abilities. Don't go search on YouTube and start looking at a bunch of drum covers to see how somebody else did it. I want to know your version of how you're interpreting what's happening. Right. I just really want them to use their ears.
Well, I think that, technology has been to the benefit of the consumer more than anybody. And it's made everything a fast track. So again, I'm probably going to sound old. I think the patience of a lot of people has shortened so much that they get frustrated so quickly. If they can't do it, they expect to do it. And the process of building your base and starting with a strong foundation, and then like I teach reading, but I don't teach them that I'm teaching them to read. I teach them to do something. The next thing you know, they're reading and they don't realize that's what I was doing. The Karate Kid, wax on, wax off thing.
Exactly.
But really what I'm teaching them to do is the basic counting and figuring it out. And then through that, they're reading and they go, because I think reading is important, right? I mean, you can get through this world, not even in music, without reading, but you're going to run into a ton of roadblocks if it's strictly just listening and whatever. But I think reading is a very, very important thing in music, depending on which path you're going to follow. Your son, for instance, if he couldn't read, would be in big trouble.
Definitely.
Trying to, because some of the rhythms that the drum corps and the indoor groups are doing now are so above and beyond what we could comprehend when I was young. And to listen to the odd groupings and all that and try to figure it out by ear would be tough. But if you could see it and hear it, then it helps a lot.
Yeah.
But I also say, in the drum set world, rarely is somebody going to go here and hand you a bunch of charts and say, we have a gig.
Yeah.
They're going to hand you a recording. You're going to have to listen to it. If you make cheat sheets and charts, it's perfectly fine. We all know famous drummers that do that because they're on the fly. One and done, they make a chart, they do the gig, it's gone.
Right.
But, I've also been in situations where preparation, is crucial, and you come in and you're not ready, but somebody else is. You just lost that opportunity.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So,
Chip Ritter's here. Chip says, "Yo,
yo, Chip."
I too will be on the Drummers Education Connection show today.
Oh, nice.
Talking to Jerry Trobman, I think is his last name, from Arizona. I believe he's from Arizona. So anyway, Drummers Education Connection happening later today at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And I'll be hanging out with Chip Ritter.
There you go.
When I have students at a lot of different high schools and they bring in jazz charts, and I was talking to Mary about this because we just went to a jazz performance clinic that our son Ian was involved with playing trumpet. And she says, do they have all written out drum parts? And I'm like, typically not. A lot of times my students will walk in with the chart for the song and it's a horn part. Or it's just like the skeleton of the drum beat will be written out, and it's tells you how many measures you're going to play with a bunch of repeat symbols, but there's almost never like actual the hit for hit chart that exists within those.
I always tell people that this is one thing that jazz band, a lot of people call it stage band, was good at in that the drummer and the bass player usually get the least amount of information of anybody in the band.
Yes.
Everybody else has a specific part they're supposed to read.
Yeah.
We get a roadmap that basically says start here and end here.
Yep.
And what they typically will do is they're not written by drummers for the most part. So they'll say, oh, it's a jazz song. So they'll take the most square jazz beat you can think, and put one measure there, and then put //// or 50,000 repeats.
Right.
And then they'll write the word fill. It doesn't tell you what to play. They write the word fill.
Yeah.
And then they'll have maybe when a horn plays and I have it above the line, which is called a section figure. And then later on they have it in the line of what a horn player, they put it on the C space. That's an ensemble figure. You know what I mean? It means the whole ensemble is playing that figure. You want to highlight that somehow. A section figure might be the saxes only. It usually says XX or something.
Mm-hmm.
And you might play something that you don't break time for that. You just play something that highlights it. I did a whole clinic on this once at the Idaho Music Educators because, again, they'll say bossa nova or whatever, and they're just Latin. That's my, they Latin. What does that mean?
Right.
Basically, they take anything from Brazil to Cuba to the African to Caribbean, and they call it Latin.
Yeah.
And it's like, and so you'd go to a festival and you'd play a bossa nova only to find out that that's supposed to be a calypso. And the judge will go, that's supposed to be this. You go, I played what was written.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So, drummers, it's really interpretive,
Yeah. And that's where they got to have a good sense of time and feel, and then their improvisational skills to be able to play something that's going to be appropriate for.
Well, and you mentioned students bringing that in. They bring them in. I would help them do this, try this. I said, by the time you play that concert, you shouldn't even be looking at that music.
Exactly.
Because you will play it. You'll practice it every time you have a rehearsal. You need to listen to what's going on. When you're initially there, keep time for them to play.
Yeah.
As you're playing, take note of things that are going on. By the time you play that concert, don't even look at that sheet. Just look at that director if it's necessary, and drive the band and kick what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll walk in with 12 pieces of paper. Where we're going to tie 6 music stands together to make. Let's just think about this a little bit. And
right. But I've also been on shows where you show up, you get hired, you're reading the book.
Yeah.
And you have to stand there and you're playing, and then if you have a rehearsal, they usually just say, okay, first chart, watch the coda here, whatever, and then this is going to be open. Second chart, they just kind of talk you through everything. It's not really a rehearsal.
Exactly. Yeah, just a talk.
That's where reading becomes huge.
Yeah, exactly. Matt Vanderbo's here. He says, "Hey," he said, "James, it's been a while."
It has.
So you're in Kentucky. How did you wind up in Boise?
Well, I went to Murray State. I had a scholarship, a full ride, and I studied music. And I was gung ho on being a band director because I got bitten by the drum corps bug when I was in high school. It was all about marching. I saw some drum corps live. I want to do that. So I got into that. And then oddly enough, there were no drum corps where I was. Nowadays you can do videos and all that, and they have camps. But it used to be you had to travel to the corps to do anything. And I auditioned for a couple. I made all of them, but I had to leave college to go. And I was going to lose my scholarship if I went. So I ended up not marching. And but I was still actively seeking and trying to get that drum corps knowledge,
Sure.
and was working a lot of drum lines. And the college band director for Murray State was Dave Wells, and he had left Murray and went to Boise State.
Oh,
and I was doing a lot of camps for him, traveling across the country during the summer. He had this workshop there. And then he wanted me to come to Boise and offered me a graduate assistantship to start working on my master's, which I didn't want to do. I'm not a great student. I can do it. My grades got better from high school to college and all that, but it's you still have to want to do it. And I was teetering moving to Nashville, and he's like, come on, I'll make sure you're taken care of. If you don't like it, you can leave. So I went to Boise August of '87 to give the marching band and GA thing a try, and then ended up staying there for 32 years. I was in Boise. So,
and I'm glad
that's what got me there. And also, I said, if I'm going to do it, I would had kind of started shifting back to our drum set too.
Yeah.
And I said, I want to do drum sets. So they let me do drum sets as an adjunct at Boise State while I was doing the drum line too. So,
Yeah. So you said that was 87 when you moved here.
Mhm.
I probably met you, I'm going to say probably 89.
was it that early? Okay.
Yeah.
Back when I had hair.
You had long hair. You were playing in Redstone. Redstone was still a rock band. And
Okay. Yeah.
I was taking drum lessons at American Music in Caldwell.
Okay.
And Rob Failer was there teaching guitar lessons. And I was really, really into the band Striper. And so I would take
Yellow and Black Attack.
Yes. So I went through this phase where I bought the black Zildjian drumsticks, and then I would take yellow electrical tape and wrap it around. So I'd have Striper drumsticks. And Rob Failer used to always kind of tease me about that when I'd walk into the store. And found out he played in this band called Redstone. And I think maybe you guys might have been playing some kind of outdoor something somewhere, probably in Boise.
Okay.
And I hadn't actually officially met you yet, but at that time, I had a Modern Drummer magazine that had this Tama ad on the I think it was in the inside cover, maybe the back, but this really big red Tama drum kit with a rack, and then the rack above with the cymbals hanging down, and all of a sudden, and that was like, I would just drool over that picture. And you were the first person I ever saw in the flesh who had a big red drum kit with this rack and this upper rack thing. And so I was like totally taken in by this guy with this drum kit that looked really similar to this picture in Modern Drummer magazine. And so that's when I just had to meet you.
Okay. Yeah. I had that. Yeah. I still have that kit, believe it or not.
Now, was that, what kind of kit was that?
That was a Premier kit.
Premier. Okay.
And oddly enough, I had, it didn't come that way. It was like a cream colored egg, kind of like Eric Clapton's guitar.
Okay.
And I bought that kit when I was a freshman in college, and it was a 24-inch kick. And the smallest tom was 14. It was 14, 16, 18. I was going through my Bonham phase, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the 80s was kicking in and the power tom era, and I wanted to add more drums to the kit, and Premier didn't make them. So I ordered some shells from a back of Modern Drummer. It was a company called the Modern Drum Shop in New York. And I got the blank shells, and then I decided to take the wrap off of the Premiers, and I stained everything brown, right? Okay. Like a mahogany or whatever, and added that to the kit. And then it became 10, 12, 14, and they were all the same depth. And then 16, 18. And then I saw, I think it was a Neil Peart ad with the candy apple red drum set. I thought, God, that looks so cool.
Right.
And I met a guy in Kentucky through playing in a band, but he painted cars for a living. So he painted those drums for me.
Oh, wow.
To be candy apple red. And that's the kit I came to Idaho with. Yeah.
Well, it was.
And then I bought the rack in Idaho.
It was so cool to see that. Excuse me. I'd never seen anybody in person that had anything like that until I saw you, and so I just knew I had to be friends.
Okay. It was an interesting thing to hang the cymbals from up top down. Yeah. What I found is the cymbals would sustain a lot more when they're hanging than they do when they're on a stand. That's why a lot of concert band, they have those cymbal stands with a giant hook that comes around, and you hang the suspended cymbal from it because it allows the cymbal to ring more, because there's no something below it that's going to deaden that sound.
Where it's,
you just have to make sure that they're tight and they don't come loose while you're playing.
Right. Which I'm sure that happened at some point.
So, I was constantly reaching up and trying to turn them.
little turn on this one and that one. Yeah, that was so cool to see that drum kit. And then later I got kind of this wine red double bass Tama drum kit because I was
I think I remember that kit.
Trying to be Neil Peart. It had toms were 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, and then the floor toms were 16 and 18, and then I added 3 rototoms to it, a 6, 8, and 10, and of course a sea of cymbals. And I spent years trying to become the drummer for Rush.
I mean, we all get on board, and we get that point where, you know, we go play a gig and we would take everything we had.
Yeah.
You felt every cymbal, that one's cracked. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We would take everything, you know.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, even when Redstone went from being this rock band, and we did originals and stuff too, and opened up some shows and stuff like that, but they ended up turning to a country band. And here I'm in this country bar with a 3-sided double-tiered rack with plexiglass shield in front of me, you know, and all this playing country. And of course, we pretty much rocked up everything that we did, even though it was country. And but I mean, you know, you do it, and then, you know, I actually carried my own riser too back then.
Wow.
It was we did like a waterbed. I put it together, and so I put hinges on there, and I would once the bass cymbal was together, all the cases would go inside of it. Then we'd put the top on it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So that's, you know, so when we do a gig, we carry in. I mean, you know, back then you carried the light show, everything.
The sound, you know? Yeah, everything. Of course, you're younger, so you don't mind doing all that work.
Oh yeah.
Now, if some of the shows I play, I'm like, oh, I think I could just get by with kick, hat, and snare.
Oh yeah.
That's all. That's all I need.
Well, I mean, you know, I've got, you know, I started playing Yamaha in the mid '90s and switched over to being a Yamaha artist. I still have a recording custom and a maple custom, but when I lift those cases, they weigh so much. I'm like, how did I do this?
Right. Yeah.
You know, lifting the bass drum is like, oh my gosh, it's so heavy.
Right.
Know?
Yeah.
And I still have like my first kit over there. I lift that bass drum and it weighs nothing.
Right.
You know, it's crazy.
Yeah. So,
and the hardware we had back then, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. Well, that's actually something that, as far as hardware goes, I still prefer the heavy hardware. I think, I don't know if that's something in my mind that I just feel like everything needs to be super stable.
Well, if you're mounting stuff off of it, it does. If you're mounting toms and cymbal arms coming off and all that kind of stuff, the last thing you want is to be playing and everything just shaking around.
Well,
like
even
Ringo, you know.
Yeah, even my snare drum though, if I use a lightweight, well, I guess I would parallel this like playing midline shows. If I have a really lightweight snare stand, my snare will start migrating around.
Yeah,
it'll start drifting around. So if I don't have a heavy enough snare stand, where it's going to stay put as I play.
Just the appropriate gear for the type of music you play is what. Yeah. Same with heads and sticks and cymbals and all that.
Yeah.
Get what's appropriate for what you're doing.
So, you're here in Boise. You're teaching at Boise State. You're teaching the drum line. You're teaching the drum set, and you just have all of this education stuff that you're involved in, along with playing with bands around town, having a house gig for a long time. What was the path that led you to working for Vader Drumsticks?
Okay, well, I mean, I was the typical musician juggling is what I call it. You know, we become a jester. We're gigs, lessons. You're doing this now. Gigs, lessons, studio, drum lines, whatever. You know, bring that income in. You know, keep me from doing manual labor, although I was moving equipment. So, but you know, I had become through uh, using the product first, and but started talking to them about um, offering more in the marching realm because at the time they had a 3S and a couple of things, but they didn't have a lot. And I think when the Ralph Hardiman stick took off for Vic Firth, that everybody kind of tried to emulate that stick in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And but I was really devoted to the drumsticks that they made for drum set. I really liked them, and
Yeah.
I mean, growing up, I tried everything, and there was a slow beat advanced funk stick that I eventually learned was made by Vader, which wasn't a public name yet,
Right.
and a guy at a music store. There's a company in Boston that makes this, So I ended up finding out it was a Fatback 3A at the time. And anyway, so I started getting into those sticks and met the guys, and um, eventually started buying direct with my name on them and stuff like that, and meeting them at trade shows and stuff like that, and just opened up this dialogue and would uh, became close friends. Would help them set up and tear down, go out and have dinner with them or drinks, and developing a relationship, and then wanting to expand that end of it more. And since I was involved with Boise State and working with other schools, I felt like I had a channel to have groups that could try some of those products or
Yeah.
whatever. And they had come out with more models. This not because of me. They had already done this. The MV7, which was the closest thing they made to a Ralph Hardiman, and the MV2, which was kind of a copy of a Tom Hannum stick. And those were two really popular drum corps instructors. And so I was testing those out, and then through communications, they kept expanding. They created the MV8, which was like the I'm drawing a blank on his name, Paul Reddick stick, and you need to do this, you need to do this, and most people don't know this. The bass drum models that almost everybody uses now. That original design was actually Vader's before it was anybody else. Uh, but that's another story. But anyway, so through those people, I uh, was offering advice, and then they were asking me questions sometimes, and so it developed into this thing about you know maybe kind of advising or coming on board and trying to help them with the marching end of it, and expanding more into the education side. So through communications with Chad Brandolini and Alan Vader and Chad Cunningham at the time, I was kind of brought in to expand that end of it. And so I was trying to get more schools involved, more instructors involved, and because Vader was very prominent in the drum set end of things,
Right.
and a lot of people used it. But then when it came to the marching side of things, they didn't even look at Vader.
Sure.
So that my goal was to get them to look at this and go, we use IP. I believe, at that time, Vader was making all those,
Mhm.
So I was always about, don't discard this because you don't think they do it. They do it. You just didn't know they did it. And then
Yeah.
try to get the products in people's hands, you know.
Yeah.
And I came on board in 2013 officially,
Okay.
the end of 2013. And until COVID, March of 2020, the job was suspended, and because you couldn't travel,
Right.
schools went remote. And what I was doing was working with schools, traveling, and you couldn't cross the borders and stuff like that. And so they stopped all that. And then, like everybody, they downsized tremendously during COVID, and they kind of learned to get by with a smaller workforce and focus more. What they're going to do moving forward, I don't know. I still communicate with those guys. We still talk on the phone
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and all that. I still use the stuff, uh, but I think that they kind of pulled the reins in a little bit during COVID, and kind of focused on just staying afloat And I'm not saying that, I'm saying every music company did that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then they're kind of expanding again. But I don't know how much they're going to put toward education again because of there's a whatever, a lot of ground that was gained was lost during COVID.
Yeah. Were you involved at the time, like helping design any of those sticks, like for snare or tenor or?
Not necessarily design, but talk about expanding based on some things that they were already creating for other companies and stuff like that to expand the Vader line. And so, and then to bring back some things and then to add some things. So there's a sumo tenor stick that we came up with. There's the Articulite. That's my name. I think they call it the Articulate. It's an indoor tenor stick, which is basically the same tip that's on a 3A on a marching tenor stick, like the TS1, which is the common spaceship design tip.
Yeah.
And they had made some aluminum mallets for a long time, and a lot of drum corps started getting away from that because of the aluminum on the rim, the big ball, the shock to your hand. When the indoor marching mode has become very pad oriented now. You play on the drums when you're in your element, but 90% of what these people are doing are playing on these hard pads.
Yeah.
And aluminum mallets would put a shock into your arms and stuff. So you started to see the tenors, everybody going to sticks, and bass drum mallets, everybody going to wood products. So, we tried to focus more on that stuff too and expanding that. And we did change the whole keyboard line.
Oh yeah. With all the keyboard mallets and
yeah. So we created they had a basic set of stuff. And part of the things I ran into, a lot of people said, well, I love the sticks, but I don't like the keyboard stuff, And I would say, what is it you're looking for? So we created a concert ensemble line and a marching ensemble line. And, you can look all that stuff up about what they are, but the idea was to focus, for a lot of schools, the front ensemble stuff they use year round if they don't tear it up.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we try to put a more of an emphasis into that,
Yeah.
to make the education side of things more rounded. You know what I mean? So they had timpani mallets already, but a lot of people, drum set artists were using them, but not a lot of schools. So the whole thing was to make people aware that it was more than just drum set related.
Yeah. I you mentioned Vader making sticks for IP. I didn't know until I became on board with Vader, which you had everything to do with that. But I didn't realize how many drumsticks Vader had made for other companies prior to Vader being kind of a known brand.
Right. Well, I think there's an insider gentleman's agreement not to just talk about that all the time. You know what I mean? But I felt that it was necessary for people to know because they would dismiss a product without knowing anything about it.
Sure.
And say, well, and I'll use IP as an example. This is the best stick out there. I go, well, Vader makes that.
Yeah.
So it's great that you like that stick, but I'm just telling you, if you like that stick and you like that quality, Vader makes it. So don't just, you know what I mean? If you love IP and want to stay on IP, that's great. But you should check this out if you like that. And people don't realize this. And there was a time when Vader made a lot of the Big First product.
Yeah.
And of course, people don't realize when Zildjian first came out with drumsticks, they were made by Vader. And then Zildjian bought a factory and started to do it themselves, messed it up. Everybody knows that's no secret.
Yeah.
And for people who love the Zildjian product, they probably remember at one time that these are great, and then they became bad.
Right.
and then Vic Firth was going to basically retire, get out of the business, and he sold to Zildjian, and then Zildjian acquired Vic Firth, and so Vic Firth is making both the Zildjian and the Vic First sticks now. But there's a lot of insider things. Mike Balter is under the umbrella now. Most people don't know that all the keyboard mallets were made for Vic First by Mike Balter.
Yeah.
So it's not as big of a world as you think about.
Sure.
And it's not like these. Of course, they're competitors, but they're not enemies. For the most part. Now, IP is making their own sticks now. I think that happened around 2018.
Okay.
End of 2017, 2018, they expanded to start doing it. But I always, Vader is a family business, and so many of the other companies out there built their businesses through Vader. And so for me, I'm not going to say the other products are bad. If you love them, I think that's great. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
I liked the family, I liked the environment, and I liked the product, and I like the people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've been I think I've been with Vader since 2018, and everybody's super easy to get a hold of.
And if you call them on the phone, you're likely to get Alan picking up the phone just as much as you are anybody. And Alan's the president of the company.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And people don't realize that Alan, of course, he's on the phone, he's doing this, and he gets up and I've been there. He walks out and he starts rolling sticks to check them for straightness. And he's very much hands-on. And I think that's the one thing. I understand that technology has made a lot of things automated, but Vader is still very much a lot of hands-on stuff.
Yeah.
And I could say the same thing. I'll do this for a second. I'm not trying to be I'm gonna take your hat off here for a second. I'll put a hat on for Sabian for a second. I visited both Zildjian and Sabian's factories back in 2000, and the same family, right? Same secret formula. But what I was amazed at was Zildjian was very automated. Sabian was very much hands-on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've always admired that with anything,
Yeah.
So
somebody who has their hands on the product.
Yeah. So, but anyway, that's how it ended up with Vader, and I still believe in the product. And again, I'm not downplaying anybody else's stuff, because I think that across the board, when you're with the major companies, be it sticks, heads, cymbals, drums, they're all great products. You just have to find what works for you. What works for me is what I would recommend to others. You know what I mean?
Yeah, same.
And what works for you might be completely different. You recently made a cymbal change based on sounds and things that you like.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's not that the previous company was bad. It's just that your ear was always drawn to this other company.
It is. Yeah, for sure.
And I mean, when I can tell you that the big thing when I was a kid, you'd go to the music store, they were like $2 for a pair of sticks. Wow. And you had about 3 options.
Yeah.
You had the Collado, which is the Regal tip, and you had the ProMark.
Yep.
And you had like off brands like Ludwig and things like that. Most of those companies didn't make their own stuff. ProMark did, Regal tip did. And I went through that. And then, like I said, I graduated to a stick that I liked and found out it was made by Vader. And then again, I was using Vader before they actually came out in public as being Vader. They were just private label.
Yeah, you and I talked about that in depth before. Like there was a drumstick called the K7000.
Yeah, that was Ken Morton bought those for the Pro Shop. And so he had a K for Ken and then a series of numbers.
Yeah.
That was for the Pro Shop only. That wasn't something you'd see worldwide.
I had no clue other than I think I picked them up in the store, played a little bit with them, thought they felt great, and then I kept buying them. That was
same thing.
That was my stick for a long time.
Yeah,
it was a K7000 stick.
And then they came out under. I actually was getting sticks, and it said James Animal Harrison. Right?
Yeah.
Now I haven't gotten sticks with my name on them forever. I know you do it and everything like that, but this is back when they just had the basic block lettering.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I went to I can't remember if it was the NAMM show or the PASIC show, and Vader had a booth, and they just come out as Vader, and Alan and Ron were there, and I walked up to the booth, and I had my name tag, and it said James Harrison. It said Boise, Idaho. And he goes, "Are you James the Animal Harrison?" I said, "Yes, I am." So I was shocked that because they were making that stick, with
Yeah.
my name on it.
Yeah. That's cool. All right. So I want, so if anybody's watching and they have a question for James,
Apparently nobody has any questions for me.
well, Chris Parks said Fatback 3A is my favorite time. Is my all-time favorite drumstick. Is the Fatback 3A.
Still have some. Yeah.
Mine is the 5B wood tip. That's my go-to stick. I feel like I could do pretty much anything with that stick. I think that's a workhorse drumstick for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried them all. I've settled on so many different ones now, depending on what I'm doing. My two favorites are the Fusion model, which is between a 5A and a 5B, and then the Keg 5B, if it's a little heavier. So I tend to lean toward those round tip sticks versus the acorns and stuff.
Yeah.
But because I like the sound, and I've talked about this before, that it seems with a round tip, no matter what angle a drum is at, you're getting primarily the same amount of surface contact compared to an oval or a bead or an acorn or a teardrop or a barrel, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like
so I tended to lean toward the round tip.
The angle of how your toms are placed or something is going to work with that round tip then
right. And I used to sit really, really low, and I had the drums high. If you remember when I had the cage, you could even see at the top of my head because I sat really, really low. And I'm paying the price for that. Yeah, I'm paying the price for that now with my hip and my back probably, but I sit a lot higher now, and I brought the drums down because the '80s everything was exaggerated on depth. Sure. And we're back to more of a traditional size thing now. But,
yeah. So on your social media pages on Facebook and Instagram and your YouTube, you have a lot of videos and instructional things out there, tips. Recently, you've been going through like drumming hacks on like cleaning drum heads and things like that, or what you would call a hot topic item. Or a topic is or something that's a little controversial, or maybe it's dividing the drummer community a little bit.
Right.
One of those for me is traditional grip.
Okay.
And I want to ask you this because
I'm out of here.
Now, I'll tell you, I'm a match grip player. I've always have been a match grip player. When I was in 7th grade, my family lived in Spokane, Washington for about a year. And when I got involved with band class there was a percussion only class, and there was probably about 40 plus students in a room. And their goal of that class was to train us to become ready for high school marching band. And we were all required to play traditional grip. That was taught to us. That was like the forward thinking of the junior high, was to get students ready for high school marching band. And so that's where it started for me with playing traditional grip because of marching band. But for drum set playing and things like that, I might switch to traditional as a goof maybe, or just to do something different for a little bit. If you're playing a 3-hour gig, maybe you get bored. But I guess I'll also preface what I'm going to ask, because my son has been so involved with the marching arts, with traveling in drum corps and now WGI groups like that, very competitive, as you know. There seems to be, at least locally, a big push or a trend right now to get away from traditional grip. And what I've discovered with students, because I have students at multiple schools throughout the valley, is that the thought process behind not doing it, it's just too hard. It's too hard for the students to do. That's like that's where they're basing it all off of. And
Right.
some of these not to throw the band directors under the bus necessarily, because I think they overall do a great job, but many of them aren't drummers or percussionists anyway to begin with. So they have some kind of thought in their head that match grip is the way to go for marching band, for snare drum players. That rubs me the wrong way, because I feel like we should be helping them prepare for the next step. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's different because obviously, the era that I grew up in, it was always taught as traditional grip. If you played match grip, you were considered self-taught or uneducated,
Yeah.
right? And back in the day, the drums were tilted,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a necessity for that. And then they came out with these angle reduction bars, which allowed you to hook the straps. This is before harnesses, hook the straps on to make the drum level. And then you started seeing some of the drum corps going to match grip. And there was a time when Santa Clara went there and won. And then every drum corps except like one went to match grip for a while. Then they came back. So being taught by a jazz drummer first, I learned that first. And it wasn't until college that studying music that my professor at the time, Tom Van Arstel, and you're getting into timpani and you're getting into keyboard percussion and a lot of multiple percussion. And the match grip makes perfect sense. And then there was this whole wave forever where everybody talked about match grip being the way to go because you can play any surface
Mm-hmm.
with the same technique, even though there's subtle techniques you play away from it on a keyboard and all this. But
Right.
it became more about that, where there were two factions that were keeping the traditional grip going, and that was marching and that was jazz drums, right? And you've
Right.
always got people that do both, right?
Yeah.
And when I first came to Idaho in '87, the very first day of band camp with Boise State, one of the drummers had marched in the troopers, I think. He goes, "Hey, can we play traditional grip?" And I said, "Well, everybody go to traditional grip." And I just looked down the line. I said, "Nope, match grip," because I knew it was the first day of camp. I didn't have time to deal with everybody's grip being different.
Mm-hmm.
So I just matched. We went with that. Over time, it's gravitated back to where that. Now, the stigma you're talking about, for the people that are in the marching arts, a lot of them, they're hardcore traditional grip.
Yeah.
Is it more difficult? In my opinion, yes. I think that physically it's been proven that it uses a lot less muscles. And so the tendency is this hand, that's my left hand for people, it tends to be weaker
Mm-hmm.
than the right hand. Uh, but they learn to overcompensate and do all this. But I think that there's a perspective from even judges that if you play traditional grip, it's harder, you deserve more credit for it. And I'm just of the thing that you should do what is going to allow the group to rise to the level that you're looking for. And if traditional grip is holding you back, go to match grip if it gets you to that thing. If you've got the players that can do it, then by all means, I don't think the grip should make a difference. And I think if you get outside of the drummer world, you go audition for a band, and you walk in and you got the guitarist and bassist and keyboard. They go, "Hey, you play traditional grip?" You go, "Yeah." "Oh no,
Right.
no thanks." They don't care. They
No.
care about how you play. So the only person that cares about it is a drummer. Now, my personal opinion is match grip makes more sense. I think it's easier if you hand a baby sticks. They don't put it between their fingers and play this way. They play this way. So I
Right.
think it's a natural art to play it that way. But I think that there's uh, a reason they both exist. I don't have a problem with existing as much as I have a problem with people's attitudes about them. And that's not a slam on you. That's
No, I'm not taking it that way. It just seems like it's a trend, and I think eventually the trend will come back around. Like to
I've seen it come around several times.
yeah. Um, So you've also been a judge for marching
Mhm.
band and for indoor. Uh, I'm wondering if there's like a, well, for instance, when I watched all the D3 marching band competitions the last 2 years, it seems like 50-50 between match grip and traditional grip between the schools.
Okay.
Some of the lines sound really clean, some of them not so much. And as every year you're retraining a new group of students to
Mhm.
do something, and the talent level between a freshman and a senior can be wildly different. And so it's trying to get the whole drum line to perform well together as a group, even though you got some people who are pretty weak in their skill level and some that are really strong. Um, as a judge, do you look at those drum lines differently if they're playing traditional grip versus match grip, or do you
No,
just listen?
it's all about the overall musicality of it and stuff
Mhm.
like that. Now, I mean, as a teacher yourself, and I used to experience this, I would ask a student when they came in, "Are you going to be in marching band?"
Yeah,
No, I just want to play the drum set. Okay. So I would usually do match grip,
yeah,
right?
same.
And then all of a sudden, you know, they'd be in the jazz band and they go, "Yeah, my high school director wants me to be in the snare line." I go, "Ah, now we're trying to," and they play traditional grip.
Uh-huh.
I said, "Well, play bass or play tenor." Because I said, now what's going to happen is you're going to shift your focus and put all this time into trying to learn this grip, but also learn the technique and the music at the same time when you already know how to play this.
Yeah,
So that's why I used to ask them in advance, and I would always be upset if they got derailed, because but there's also people like you said that they train them from day one
hmm,
to be that way,
yeah,
and I don't have a problem with that as long as they're still learning music along the way. You know
sure,
what I mean?
yeah,
But I've never judged one group differently than the other,
okay.
in my opinion. You know,
I was just wondering if that was a factor or
it's not for me,
okay.
but I do think that there is a kind of a, even if it's not intentional, unintentional prejudice sometimes toward groups that use match grip, that they're not as defined or educated sometimes
Yeah.
musically as somebody doing traditional grip.
So for me growing up and being in marching band, and the one season I played at Boise State, it's like, well, this is how we're playing. And I never even thought twice about it. I'm like, okay, we're playing traditional now. And
Right. A lot of it has to do with the people that come in. And I should clarify this really quickly. Uh, it's been commonly said that I was with Blue Thunder from day one. I was a drumline instructor for 32 years. I was involved for 32 years. I wasn't always the instructor. I wasn't always there every day. There were times where I was like, I got to get out of here for a while.
yeah,
And I would order stuff for them or write something, or sometimes just Dave Wells would call me, "I need to do this, what I need to do." But there were people, student leaders involved that were super driven, and they took the reins. You know what I
okay,
mean?
yeah,
And there's a lot of those over the years. You probably know a lot of those guys that when Shad Williams was there, or Zach
yeah,
Garner,
yeah,
and and there's a lot of them that took the reins and took the ball and ran with it, and got to a certain point where they might hit a brick wall, because you know there's always, like you said, new groups coming in, and in a situation like Boise State, they're at a point now where a lot of their recruiting and everything, they could be a lot more selective than they were back in the day, where they just took what they could get.
everybody,
And most high schools, here they come in from two or three different junior highs or whatever. You get what you get,
sure,
and
yeah,
you have to deal with that. And of course, we know at drumline now, a lot of them, they're not drummers at all. A lot of them, they're musically, they can read better, but technique, they play oboe and they don't march oboes, or they play you know
right,
something that they don't march, so they go to the front ensemble, or they go to the bass drum, or whatever,
yeah,
uh, and whatnot. So, but I mean, the marching arts have changed so much. It's very difficult to stay up on it, because they are so groundbreaking in what they're doing, what your son is going through, just in the time that he's been a part of it. Because he took lessons from me for a while,
Right.
And you know, from when he came in to what he's doing now, it's leaps and bounds. And the rhythms and the groupings and the stuff that they do is so condensed and so difficult
Yeah.
compared to the basics of the old school marching, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. There's some of that stuff I have trouble wrapping my head around what's happening.
Well, they're like, you know, the drum corps and
Tempos.
the drum corps and the indoor groups are kind of like the gospel chops drummers now, you know, drum set. They're just doing a tremendous amount of crazy things. And it's like, it's very impressive. And to those who are part of it, they're learning a lot and everything like that. Sometimes they come back to work with groups and they want to teach them the things that they've done, but those groups aren't ready to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's a great comparison about the gospel chop drummer versus
and it all has its place. I'm not against any of it. It's just,
yeah. I could watch a gospel chops drummer. My attention span gets really short because I feel like it's so much. I'm so overwhelmed by what's happening that it's like, where's one?
Well, I mean, you know, I think that some of the speed metal, a lot of that, where there's just a barrage of notes sometimes.
Yeah.
I've equated it to, it sounds like an auctioneer. You're waiting for them to say sold.
Yeah.
That's right. Sold. You're like, thank God.
That's another. Sorry, my allergies have just been ramped up.
You're allergic to me. Apparently, nobody wants to question me today. That, or they're afraid. They're afraid.
Well, I don't want to beat this traditional thing into the ground too much. I don't know if I'm just aware of it more or if it was always this way. You would know better than I do, at least to our the landscape of our community as far as drum corps goes. But it seems like the interest in DCI and the interest in WGI has started to really rise up in the Treasure Valley, which to me, if you're going to be a marching snare drum player, that traditional grip is a requirement for those groups. And it's being kind of just brushed off at the high school level, which to me seems like it's kind of a disservice to not encourage that more. That's your hot topic subject.
Well, I mean, we could get into a whole thing, but I can tell you this. When you say it's brushed off by a lot of the directors and everything like that, I think that the directors streamline to teach for events now. I don't think that they teach music as a whole as much as now the elementary and junior highs tend to teach about music. By the time you're in high school, you're teaching for an event. It's a jazz festival. It's a marching contest. It's a indoor thing. It's a ratings festival. It's all this. It's never just reading and learning about music, right?
Yeah.
But that's how they're judged. You know what I mean? So what did you get at contest? What was your superior rating or whatever? So they're going to do what they think gets the group there the quickest, and to take and put the time necessary into developing a group technique like traditional grip. If it's not done from the start, it can derail a process a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of directors are afraid of that. But I also think that there's a push, and this is to the benefit of people like you and me, that a lot of directors will encourage their students to get the private lessons so that they can take care of that thing for them instead of that director.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm in favor of both. I don't disagree. I think if I had to pick one and one grip only, and what makes the most sense, match grip. I grew up playing both. For me, when I play, if I sit at the drum set, if I'm playing my rock kit, when I have more stuff on both sides, it's match grip because it allows me to go evenly in a direction. Where this grip to the left side, I feel more limited. But the drum set goes to the right for me because that's the way I was taught when I grew up.
Yeah.
So when I play brushes, I rarely play them match grip. I play traditional grip. When I play jazz, it's just instinctively I go to this. So to me, it's an emotional decision or a musical decision. It's never because I feel like I could do one better than the other. I feel
Okay.
pretty adept at both.
Yeah.
Now, you and I know, a lot of people know I had a stroke. It's almost been 4 years ago now, 3 something years ago. And uh, my right hand went away for a while. So uh, I had to work to get some of the finger control stuff back. I don't feel, I feel like I'm back. Uh, I don't know that my speed is 100%, but a lot of the dexterity and stuff is there again.
Yeah.
Had it been traditional grip, it could have been really, really weird because I think that because it's a different motion, you
Sure.
know. And
Yeah.
of course, I will say this about drum corps: a lot of them have gone through and they've developed what works very well, and
Mhm.
they have discarded what doesn't.
Yeah.
And so to model what they do in terms of rehearsals, in terms of, you know, the process of learning and creating video assignments and stuff like that can help you get to where you need to be. I think the biggest problem is everybody sees what they do and they want to just jump to that point, not realizing that they started with basic warm-ups to develop the ability to get to where they are. But they've done some things with metronomes and all that, and to copy what they do is something that's great for a lot of the schools because they've gotten rid of a lot of things that don't work.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And I think that's great. And that comes to being following a mentor or a drum hero or anything. You want
Yeah.
to do what if somebody's successful, if you model what they do, the chances of you being successful are better than they are if you just ignore it.
Yeah. Exactly. I when Christian was auditioning for Battalion, I I got a really great front row view of like how those rehearsals were put together and the efficiency in all of that. And then you come back and you're watching kind of like the high school way of doing thing. You're like, oh, if
Yeah,
only.
yeah, and it's like they're so efficient with their time,
Yeah.
um, and even leading up to the point where they start to tour. Then once they're touring, it's like
Yeah.
it's crazy. But I think that the thing about it is that a lot of people don't take into consideration is it's audition based, and they're getting the cream of the crop.
True.
Where
True.
high schools don't get that.
Right. Yeah.
They're taking whoever's in band.
Yeah.
College, some of them you take what you get. Some of them you're not quite ready. You're going to be on the cymbal line or whatever.
Yeah.
They still take you, but the dedication level is the biggest difference. The discipline level is the biggest difference. And I think that if more drummers could model that, it would be great. And I think that people that go to drum corps, when they come back, they've absorbed this concept and the way to do things, and then they run into this roadblock when they look at the way it was before, and they expect everybody to be able to do what they did,
Yeah.
but without going through the process that they did to get there.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
teaching these drum lines. There's been, even at Boise State, some incredible players with great hands have come through, and a lot of these guys. Sean, I can't think of his name. It starts with a K. Anyway,
Sean Malarkey.
Sean Malarkey, great hands,
Yeah.
and a super drive. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I'm sure that he learned along the process that as you start teaching, depending on what you're teaching and what you have to teach for, you have to streamline that. And I used to get mad at I treat kids differently than I did college students.
Hmm.
College students I could be a little gruff with because I'm like, dude, we have 3 rehearsals a week. You can't come in here not knowing it because we can't clean what you don't know. This is not
Yeah.
the time to learn it.
Right.
It's the time to clean it. And I said, I can't wait till you go out into the real world and you're unprepared. Now, and I say this to drum set people too. If you're not prepared, I don't care if it's a symphony, if it's an audition or whatever, The day you lose an audition or you get beat is a day you learn some of the most important things you can about being a musician.
Agreed. Yeah.
And because you learn, why did you get beat? And the people who didn't prepare will give you 1,000 reasons why they didn't get it instead of the one.
Yeah. Yeah. I stress that all, I've got a handful of working drummers around town that are taking lessons with me, and we talk about preparedness all the time. Like, how well do you know that song inside and out? How well do you know everybody else's part? Not that you have to play their part, but do you know where the vocals are supposed to be? Do you just even prepared? Like, do you have your equipment checklist? Are you going to leave gear behind, or are you going to, once you've done that once or twice, it's like, I never want to experience that again.
And I get it. There's always drummers that there's some in Boise that we both know that they wing everything.
Yeah.
But they're really, really good at it.
Uh-huh.
They're great drummers, and they're known for that. But if they show up to a gig to sub for somebody, they wing it, and that gig all of a sudden becomes like you're standing up in a canoe because it's not what people are used to. They didn't learn the material; they're just playing. And there's a difference between learning something and just playing.
Yeah.
Playing gets you there, but learning it makes the rest of the band comfortable. And there's a reason why people like Kenny Aronoff, well, his phone rings all the time.
Right.
Because people know he's a professional. He's going to prepare. He's going to put what's signature there. He's going to know it.
Yeah.
And growing up, and even in my time in Boise, my goal in Boise, I never cared if I was the best drummer in town.
Mm-hmm.
Still don't care. But I cared about that. I wanted to be across the board one of the top 5. I always said 5. That my phone would ring regardless of the style. It was marching, jazz, rock, country, Latin. That I could play any of those and be ready for any of those, or learn the material for any of those type of things. Yeah. Or you could throw symphony in there because I played in the Boise Philharmonic and stuff too.
Yeah.
That I could put those hats on. I'll go back to your Fred hat here. That I could put the different hat on and still play the gig. Yeah. And so, I may not be the top jazz guy, but he's a good big band drummer, or he's this, or he learns some material, or whatever. That's what I cared about.
Yeah. Well, it's for my experience is like, the better I know the material, the better I'm prepared, the more comfortable I'm going to be personally. And then the more comfortable that everybody else around me is going to be, is that security of knowing, oh, this guy's got this.
Right. And we all know the especially small group jazz. No rehearsing. You go in and you play, and right. Usually, like we talked about music, you don't even get it. If you do get it, it's a real book and it's a horn chart, and you're you're just getting the form. It's really important in jazz to understand the form of a tune. And then you just play and you act and react. That's it.
Yeah.
And there's people that play rock that way. I feel like Mitch Mitchell was that way with Jimi Hendrix. I feel like Keith Moon was that way with the Who. I feel like they were act and react drummers.
Mm-hmm.
Cream, Ginger Baker. And then it got into the 70s and 80s, and you started hearing more refined and repetitiveness. And a lot of the 80s, when you went to see a concert, it sounded like a faster version of maybe longer guitar solos or whatever of what you heard on the records.
Yeah.
You hear the same fills and stuff like that, And I think that music dictated that because artists wanted that, especially singers. They don't want to be thrown off by some fill you did,
right.
And I've used this term 1,000 times and play the show and take the dough. I don't get hired to be the drummer that I want to be. I get hired to be the drummer that they want me to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if they're playing a pop tune, play the pop tune. Don't play it in a gospel style.
Right.
Now, I'm not a gospel style drummer. I am impressed by it. I will say that. But, if somebody wanted a certain style, I'd say, I'm not your guy.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, we're going to do this hip hop gig. You know what? I'm not your guy for that. It's not that I don't appreciate it. and I don't like certain things, but it's not something that I absorb myself in. I could learn a show for you if you want me to, but you know, I
I,
don't.
I really like what you said about I'm not getting hired because
Dude, I'm not getting hired to be the drummer I want to be.
yeah, that.
I'm getting hired to be the drummer they want me to be.
Yeah, exactly. I think I think some of us drummers get this itch. Just can you keep time? Can you just play the groove, or do you feel like, oh, I need to play all of these cymbals in this song, or I haven't played a drum fill in 2 bars. I need to put something in there. When
Yeah.
one of the songs that a lot of students learn, which I think is a good one to start with, is Back in Black from AC/DC. There's not much happening in that song. And if
there's a difficulty, there's a hidden difficulty in that song. But
there is, yes,
yeah.
yes. That, I mean, we could get off on this too, but it's, don't play a drum fill where one doesn't belong. Can you put yourself in the seat of being a Phil Rudd and just play that song how it's played? Oh, I played this triplet feel drum fill, and well, there's nothing triplet about anything in this song. Why are you playing that? Your rhythm is not meshing with anything else that's happening.
Right.
So
well,
yeah. So it's because they're being the drummer they want to be, not the drummer that's
and
wrong.
There's a musical maturity that happens as you age.
Yes.
And as your wheelhouse of music grows, right? And the first song I learned to play on drum set, note for note, was called "Who'll Stop the Rain" by Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Yeah, great song.
Because it was on the 45, and I learned it drum fill, note for note. And then the first band I was in, I was at 14. They were older. They were old enough to drive. They would have to come get me and carry my equipment and whatnot. And some of it I would learn note for note, and some of it I would just learn primarily what was there, but maybe do a different fill or something like that. And then, when you're young, you feel like you need to do a fill because you can. And you feel like you need to hit a cymbal because it's there. Yeah. Or you need to hit a drum because you own it, And over time, you realize, like you said, there's a basic setup in any kit that those drums will get played more than anything else. And the basic kit we know is the kick, snare, a rack, tom ahead of you, and a floor tom, and a cymbal and a ride. There's your basics. Yeah. And you can play any gig with that. And you talk about Phil Rudd or whatever. Well, I think that as you mature over time, we all become a little more Ringo, is what I call it. Right? A little more Ringo and a little bit less bombastic with trying to put a lot of notes in. If you grow up listening to progressive rock and that's your wheelhouse, the minute you play something that's not progressive rock, you're still going to try to fit that square peg in that round hole because that's what you know. Yeah. And then you start to get an appreciation for the Phil Rudds and the Stan Lynch from Tom Petty is a great and I talk about these underrated drummers. There's so many of them that most studio drummers are that way, but just to be able to hold a groove, and that's everybody else in the band is looking for that. Rarely are they going, can you do that, Phil?
Yeah. Exactly.
But it's so different if you're in the band and if somebody else is playing a bunch of guitar stuff and it's not what's there, you go, whoa. Can you just play the guitar part that's supposed to be there?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The simplicity in the playing, like for Back in Black, and the discipline, I think, just to go dum, da-da-dum. Can you do that? Or do you have to feel like you're going doom, something that's yeah. I saw a band playing a cover of that, and the drummer was playing like just all this double bass muck in that song. I'm like, what?
Well, this is good. It's going to sound like I'm old again when I say this. The video age has what gets a lot of clicks is a lot of notes, a
Yeah.
lot of flash, um, and spectacle, more
Yeah.
so than refinement, if you want to call it that. And but what makes you a working drummer is the exact opposite, and
Right.
it's hard to swallow that sometimes. And I think that as we get older, like you said, the drum set may get a little smaller. The you use what's appropriate for a gig, and
Yeah.
I think the difficult thing is um, we're such a video driven world now, where like I said, people hear with their eyes and they see the flash. And if you probably won't remember this, there was a Modern Drummer Festival. They used to do DVDs every year.
Mhm.
Modern Drummer magazine used to have this huge festival,
Yeah.
and they had Chad Smith come out, and he was with Ian Pace, and they would all do drum solos and then answer questions, sometimes teach, whatever. And Chad Smith's moment came on. For 4.5 minutes, he played a groove, not a single fill.
Oh, wow.
Uh, and 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 this is a festival where people are showing their best stuff,
Right.
flash everything. And he did no fills. He played a groove. And then at the end of it, Ian Pace says, "Ladies and gentlemen, that is how you play music, and that is how you make money."
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Chad Smith, we know from the Chili Peppers, has created some tremendous drumming,
Absolutely.
and he's quite a character, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But uh, and I've seen him do clinics and play "Suck My Kiss" and all these tunes and all that. But it was, here's one of the biggest festivals out there at the time, where they're going to sell hundreds of these DVDs and all that, and it's online. You can look it up. No drum fills, one group.
Wow.
And you look at it now and you think, oh my gosh, was he 4.5 minutes without anything else but just drums? I mean, you could sit there and go like this and like it, but for a lot of people, their attention span doesn't get it,
Sure.
you
Yeah.
know. But it's amazing.
It's just like that cartoon that I think we've all seen where uh
You're
it's
hired.
yeah, the drummer he's just the show you could just visualize or hear
Yeah, it's two cartoons, one with a bunch of notes.
says you're great and the other guy's like boop bop and you're hired.
Right. I
Yeah.
used to have that on the bulletin board on the door of the drum set room at Boise State back in the day. I saw it in Modern Drummer, I think, and I ran it across the copy machine and cut it out and put it on the board there.
Yeah.
You know.
I get if I a lot of new students that I get who can already play drums to a certain extent, I usually ask why they're here.
Mhm.
Um, the two most popular answers are I want to be able to play faster and I want to play odd time signatures. I'm like, okay, you want to play faster. How fast can you play now? and time is just an idea. It's not on a anything steady. It's just reining them back in, breaking it back down to basics. Did you ever discover that too, teaching?
Yes, and there's been a lot of famous drummers, Tommy Igoe and Rick Latham, a lot of that. They always say if you run into a roadblock of any kind, go back and address the basics,
Yeah.
because that will put into focus what it is that's the problem. For speed, it's usually technique that inhibits you. And
Yeah.
one of the biggest things is that people who initially play for speed, they can build that in. But the problem is they're usually tight when they do it, and that becomes an inhibitor,
Yeah.
right? So until you address that, they don't know that. They just want to get fast. You can get fast. You can get fast without taking any lessons.
Yeah.
But whether you can do it where you're not going to run into that roadblock is one thing. Odd times, it's just a matter of understanding and how it's presented,
Right.
you know,
Exactly.
as to how you can understand it. But I think that, uh, and I always encourage people to take lessons. People in Boise, knock up Fred there, knock on the door, call them up, whatever,
Yeah.
to get in there, because and we know that so many people are just watching things to learn now, and I'm not against that, but I think it should be in addition to instead of in place of. Uh, so I think Drumeo is fantastic. I think it's a great resource of, of material, um, transcripts with and without drums, everything. Presenting different drummers, presenting different things, hacks and gear. And I think it's a great supplemental tool. But I
Yeah.
still think it's supplemental. Mike Johnston, amazing educator, amazing person, and a great perspective and on teaching and everything would be a great benefit for somebody to jump on board to that. But I still think it's beneficial to have a local teacher to refine in person everything else that you're doing.
Yeah, because you get immediate access to that dialogue back and forth, that
Right.
interaction.
And it's so if somebody's on YouTube and they see something, they can bring it to you and say, "Hey, I want to learn how to do this." You can say, "You know what? Here's some things you could do to get you closer to that point." But you also have to might say, "Okay, I understand you want to do that, but you're jumping from this rung of the ladder to this one, and there's 4 steps in between.
Yeah.
So we can work toward that, and that's a good goal to have in mind. But we need to do this first." You know what I mean? You have to. We all have a blueprint that we teach from, a basic blueprint.
Yeah, exactly.
But half of what we have to do is adapt because not everybody learns the same way or the
Right.
same rate. They don't have the same technique or coordination.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And so we have to adapt to reach each of those people. And I think that forms your teaching style over time.
Yeah.
And 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 that's where, you might have a student that has struggled and struggled and struggled, and they've been through different teachers and they finally click with one.
Right.
And their
Yeah.
parents are like, "Oh, you're the fifth teacher I've had him to, and he loves what he's doing with you and everything like that." It always feels good when you make that connection,
Yeah, absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and there's a satisfaction when you see a student grow. And I've always told students that if you grow any, that's progress. The
Yeah.
rate at which you grow is up to you, not the weekly lesson.
Right. Yeah.
It's up to what you're doing in between that. And I've had students that every week when they came in, they had it down. And
Yeah.
I wasn't reteaching anything.
Right.
I was constantly moving forward. And some of those are some of the players in town now,
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
you see a student reach something, there's a sense of pride there too, Not that you
Absolutely.
said I did that, but you're like, I helped with that.
Yeah, you're a part of that process,
Yeah.
them achieving that, and that's a pretty awesome feeling to have that. Uh, Going back for a moment, like wanting to play faster, and you said a lot of that's a technique thing. I think it was I heard. I'm going to credit Dom Famulero with this saying. I don't know if it was him or not, but uh, unique to him. But he said that tension was the enemy of motion.
Mhm.
So we see drummers want to play, and as soon as the moment you start doing something fast, that tension starts to infiltrate, and it's like you want to get that opposite thing happening where you're not tense while you're playing.
Yeah, and of course, Dom created an entire global network of students. Was the first person to really do that. Super positive guy, and if you've ever seen Dom in clinic, he would do workshops that were nothing more than him teaching leadership and motivation.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And then he would also do drumming workshops. And he was a huge proponent of the Moeller method because of the relaxation involved.
hmm
And also playing Let That Stick, rebound, and learn to work with that. And one of the funniest guys I ever did that.
yeah,
So, he could tell jokes and he had great stories. Uh, that he Liberty DeVito, drummer
mhm.
that I admire a lot, underrated in my opinion. Uh, with Billy Joel Forever, Don Famularo came up with the part for Just the Way You Are.
Really
Yes.
did not know that.
This and it was Liberty. My understanding, Liberty told the story at they had a big gathering before Dom passed. They had a big uh, party for Dom, and my understanding was that Liberty got up and said that most people don't know this, but he was playing a fairly normal beat, and Billy was like, "There's something just not. I'm not digging that," and Liberty Dom happened to be around or something, and said, "What if you tried displacing this one thing and move it to the tom or whatever?" And he did it, and it became the drum beat for Just the Way You Are.
Oh,
but
wow.
It was Dom's influence on Liberty that created that. And I don't know if that's in the book or not. I haven't read Liberty's book, but I know that it's a story that Liberty told.
Now I got to go listen to that song just so I can refresh my memory on all that part. That's pretty awesome. That
It's a very displaced. It's a great teaching tool, by the way, for learning to play and displace without it being something that's very difficult, like a Dave Weckl thing or something.
yeah, yeah. So when I know we've talked about education a lot because I kind of geek out of that, and
Well, it was my foundation for everything.
yeah. Uh, what would be your advice for getting students motivated to want to practice? I do have students that, like you said, every single week they come in prepared. They're ready to go. They're ready to springboard off of the previous thing.
Right.
You hear about, especially with adults, their responsibilities with their family and stuff that could easily take away from, being able to spend dedicating any kind of amount of time throughout the week to work on what they're doing. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that, obviously communication with the student. If you can get them to grab onto one thing that they really like and show them the path to that versus, oh, you have to learn these rudiments or you have to learn this page or whatever.
Yeah.
They treat that like homework. Homework is usually something people don't want to do.
Right.
Okay. Whereas there's one thing, I used to try to say, okay, who do you like? What do you listen to? And then I would find something there that I could relate to whatever the assignment was and show how it could relate. And this will help to get you to that point. And they would sometimes jump on board that a little bit more. I think the difficult thing is there's people, parents who use lessons as babysitting. Okay.
Yes.
and they've got their kids involved in soccer and baseball and track and field and ski team and whatever. And
Mhm.
so they just run them from one activity to another activity, and oftentimes, and even if they're in band, drumming, the private lessons sometimes take the back seat. Oh, sorry, I've got a cross country meet this week, and I'm just so worn out from running every day
Yeah.
and whatnot. You can only take the back seat so often before you have to say, okay, what is it you want to get out of this? And I would even tell sometimes with the parent there, I said, listen, if you want to pay me to babysit, that's fine.
Right. Yeah.
But if they're not getting out of this what I'm giving them or what you think they should be, it's not because the material is not there. It's because they're doing so much and not putting the effort into this. So, and I understand that, um, when soccer comes up, I used to, especially weekends, I would have to adjust my schedule constantly. Oh, I've got a match this weekend. Well, where's your match? Well, we play one at this time and one at this time, but we don't know because it depends if we win, all that. So, you're constantly adjusting the schedule.
Yeah.
Marching band, it was always a little bit of a culprit because, oh, now we've got school. We have rehearsals every day after school, and then we have drumline rehearsals at this time. So I need to move my lesson time and everything. And then half the time the lesson would shift to, I need to learn this for marching band. And it's not that it's not beneficial because you're still helping them, but it would derail whatever the focus was at that point. So I would always try to find one thing that would try to keep that in focus.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And relate it to that.
I experienced that with some students too, that we're always shifting depending on what that need is. Marching band, now we got to work on this. Jazz band festival, now we got to work on this. It's the other key things that I want to work on kind of keep getting pushed off.
It's that mentality. It's that about teaching for events are very much like athletics. It's like sports.
Yeah.
You train, you work out, you do this, and then in the season you're preparing for a game. So you're always preparing for a game and running that. And that's the drum corps world is the same thing. The indoor world is the same thing. And marching band is the same thing. And concert band has become that because we're learning this music for this festival. You know what I mean? And then we're learning music for a Christmas concert. It's always for something. And once that deadline's passed and you have all this time, it's like, okay, we're just watching videos today.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I you mentioned like the babysitting thing, and I do experience that a little bit. There was I did have a student that I taught the exact same lesson for 2 years straight. I didn't write anything new in the notebook for 2 years. Never practiced. And so I finally after that, I mean, I found myself getting bored with that situation.
Right.
So I talked to his mom and I said, "Hey, I'm happy to take your money every month, but we've been doing the same thing for 2 years with no improvement. There's obviously no practicing or anything like that." And I said, "If all the purposes is just bring him here and hang out once a week, if I know that, then I'm okay with that. Are you okay with that?" They said, "Oh, well, we'll talk about it with the family." And then I never heard from them ever again after that. And so since that situation, I've had a handful of students that I've talked to the parents and I said, "What are your expectations?" "Oh, this is just something that we do for fun and he can hang out with you and play drums or whatever." Like, okay, so they have no expectation. I still feel like I got to try to get a few minutes of understanding or learning something in there while it's still fun. But then you have the other students that walk in, they're totally gung-ho about everything that they do. They're really super driven to.
Isn't it amazing how the same amount of time per lesson goes quickly with one student and slow with another?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's if you're going, that time just it's done. It's like I just walked in the door. Yeah.
I used to take somebody if I could tell, okay, it's same one. Okay. And I would just immediately go a different direction. And sometimes let's talk about how to tune drums today
Yeah.
and try to get them interested in something else. And then say, okay, make sure you practice that, work on tuning your drum set, but make sure you practice that material. So a lot of times if their drums sounded different, then they all of a sudden wanted to play their drums more or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever it took,
Yeah. Yeah. Making sure that their drums sound good and they're set up to where they can play them easier makes a big difference in their motivation if their drums sound good. Because, they come in here and they're like, my drums do not sound like this.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got a professional recording studio set up, so everything sounds killer. Even your student kits probably sound great.
They do. They do.
And typically in their house, if you ever go to their house for a lesson, which I used to do, I just said, listen, I'll come out. It costs you 3 lessons. It costs you the one lesson before, that lesson, and the lesson after, because I'm driving there and driving back. That loses possible students. So if you want to pay for 3 lessons in a row, I'll come out to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And usually what I would do is get their set prepared the first time. Like, this is not even set up it's not even set up correctly physically. And then
right.
whatever. But again, we live and learn as teachers. And can I say one thing before I forget? Because I know we're running long here. Nobody's asking this question. I grew up in an era where the technology is not what it is today.
Sure.
And we talked about listening being kind of a lost art and whatnot, and you learned by listening. I also grew up where we didn't have click tracks and metronome.
Mm-hmm.
The metronome, you wound it up and it ticked back and forth. You watched it. You couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
Okay. Then they finally came out with one with a light on it. You could try to follow the light, but the focus became on the light and not on your listening. Yeah. And then they made one with one earpiece. You know what I mean? Yeah. And eventually we started getting more involved in the click. And the first time that I started hearing recordings, I was like, oh, I am speeding up. I'm rushing. 90% of drummers rush. It's just especially coming out of a fill.
Yeah.
And especially when you're younger, we rush. And so the technology today allows you to eliminate all of that from the get-go, because your phone is a mini computer with a free metronome on there with headphones you can plug in. Yeah. And you have the ability to have music and a click at the same time. and all that kind of stuff that never existed when we were young. And so I had to reverse that process. And first time I went into a recording studio with a click, it was very eye opening and ear opening, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
You were exposed.
you become more about that click. And then I was in a house band for a long time, and the leader of the band wanted everything pushed, right?
Right.
I call it force feeding, and she has had a successful business for a tremendous number of years and packs it out. So you can't say that what she wants doesn't work. It does work.
Yeah.
But what she wanted was tempo volume, is what I call it, and it made people excited and whatever. And and for a long time, when I would step out of that wheelhouse, it became very difficult for me to not play on the front edge of the beat. You know what I mean? Because that's what I was constantly doing at that gig.
Yeah.
And I'd have to pull back. And going into that gig, I was the opposite. I played on the back of the beat. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, to her, a lot of things felt like they were dragging, even though they weren't. It was because I played behind the beat with the snare, she felt like it was behind. So I had to start playing on the front edge of the beat, and it changed my feel a little bit. So then when I stepped out of that, it was this. So I think that because of technology the way it is now, for any young drummer, I don't care if you're playing on a practice pad or what the instrument is, it's every musician's time, every musician's job to have a good time.
Yeah.
There's no reason not to in today's society.
Yeah.
You don't rely on the drummer. Now, I tell you, as a drummer, you're going to get blamed for it, whether it's you or not, if the band's out of time. So you might as well grasp the technology and learn to play in time. And I think that when I was in marching band, we didn't have the metronome playing through a giant speaker clicking while we were learning the show.
Right.
Now they have that. And so time has become ingrained, and I think it's important. And I think that I wish that I had that, but now it's there for everybody to learn. So
yeah, I agree. I
take advantage of what you can with the technology, but still listen.
Yeah. I don't want to say I make all my students play to the click, but it's definitely part of the curriculum. Is I don't force upon them like you're going to have to play to the click for the rest of your life, but I do impress upon them how having great time, why that's so important. And I think it adds to the rhythm clarity of what they're doing. You're not taking notes and compressing them or pulling them apart in this kind of, you mentioned like being on a canoe. That's unstable.
Yeah, well, standing up in a hammock or standing up in a canoe and somebody behind you rocks that boat. You're like, oh.
Yeah. It's having really great time. Even my little kids that I teach, they think it's fun. Because, if we're playing quarter notes or eighths or sixteenths and they're playing with that metronome, it's they almost equate it to playing a video game.
Yeah. So the good thing is they're growing up without a fear of it.
Right. Yeah.
Because I think that for drummers that grew up, a lot of people will say, oh, it takes the feel out of everything. Well, no. Yes. Yeah. Things can become quantized too much.
Yes. Yes.
And we all like groups that sometimes don't sound too quantized. You can listen to Led Zeppelin. There's tunes that speed up like crazy from where they start.
Yeah.
Rolling Stones, the Honky Tonk Woman, from where it starts to where it is completely different tempo wise.
Yeah.
And I used to listen to, jazz drummers. They say, oh, listen to Elvin Jones, listen to Tony Williams. If you try to tap and metronome while they're playing, it can't be done.
No.
But there's an elasticity to their playing. But when it's all said and done, you don't feel that shifting. Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of some of the music, that it does breathe and grow like that. And there's some things that do become so quantized, but it depends on how it is. But
yeah,
it's learning to breathe within that.
Yeah, exactly. There's there's that old school way of doing things where they were a little freer, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times those bands were well rehearsed to start with, and they're all in the studio together playing. Like for the environment that I'm in, you know, and I'm tracking drums for people, I'm getting tracks sent to me. So I'm playing, I've got to be nailing that click. So with my students, I'm always thinking like, how am I going to help bring them up in the drumming community to survive in how things work now? And that's so necessary to play with that click. And if, you know, I think it was about a month ago when I had Tanner Abney on, drummer, touring drummer, I asked him, like, when he's putting feelers out there to try to network, like, is that one of your selling points, is to say that you can play with click and sequencing or anything like that? And he said, no, it's just an assumed part of the gig now. It's like, if you're going to be looking for those kind of opportunities, that he just felt like that was an assumed thing, that you can play with that. So much stuff is not just playing in time in that repeatability, but there's so much sequencing going on with maybe video production, and all these lighting rigs and all that are so synced up to a computer now.
And loops and
backing tracks or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just, you got to be on your game with that thing. Otherwise, you're just not going to get the gig.
Well, and that really comes down to being prepared is part of it, but also you'll see a lot of drummers that are wearing in-ears or headphones.
Yeah.
And some of the other band, you may not see that. Usually they all have in-ears at this point because they have a click going on, you know. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter. Disturbed, the drummer, when they were in Boise before I left in 2019, I got to hang out with them the day before and whatnot. And I got to go look at the drummer's rig, but also the tech. Mm-hmm. And he had an entire computer rig back there. He starts the songs.
Yeah.
He feeds the click to the drummer, and the drummer clicks off, because that way, once they're started, there are certain things that are queued up.
Yeah.
Be it explosions or whatever. And it's essential that they're in time with that. And you'll find that that has crept into every style of music there is.
Yeah.
You know, except the freeform jazz, you know.
Yeah, I think there's, you know, it's can be specific to what kind of scene you're playing in. You know, if you're a cover band and you don't have any desire, I guess, to play beyond any of that, you can live in your little world of what works for you. I think if you want to be a working drummer and looking for those bigger opportunities, you just have to have that skill. There's no way around it.
I quickly will tell this. I went to PASIC one year, and Kenny Arnoff was doing a clinic. And he came out and he said, "Hey, everybody, how you doing?" He said, "I'm going to show you what I do. This is what I get paid to do. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to play the number one song in the country right now, because I played on the track."
Yeah.
So he has the speakers set up and everything. He sits down. Here comes the song. It's playing. He's not even touching the drum set. It comes up to the chorus. He goes, blah. He plays the chorus. Does a fill, stops. Again, waits for the next chorus. He never played the verses of the tune. And it was the number one song. And then he said, everybody was like, "So you played on it, but all you played was the chorus?" And he said, "Yep." And so it was a trip, because you hear drumming, you hear a loop going on the whole time, but he only played the choruses, even though there's drumming going on.
Right.
He played on top of that on the choruses, and it was like, wow, you know.
Yeah.
Because oddly enough, I was playing that song with Rocky at the time, and playing the whole time, and I played the verses on a side snare with a higher pitch, and then I moved to the chorus. I played on the main snare.
Yeah.
That's how I was doing it. But it was the same thing. And Paul Lime, famous studio drummer, used to be in LA, now he's in Nashville, played on Shania Twain's "Man, I Feel Like a Woman," right? If you listen to that tune, there's a constant going under that.
Yeah.
And so we played the tune, and I'm playing it with ghost notes and all that. Paul Lime had flown into town to play with Neil Diamond, because Neil Diamond's drummer had a heart attack at the time. It was Ronnie Tutt, Elvis's old drummer.
Yeah.
I'm playing at the Grove with a Latin group, and I see a guy in the audience. I go, "Gosh, that looks like Paul Lime." And I walked up to him on the break. I said, "Excuse me, this is weird, I know, but you look exactly like Paul Lyman. He goes, I am Paul Lyman. He was shocked that somebody recognized him. So we got to talking. He was staying right there at the Grove Hotel. He came to Hannah's that night, and they were playing the next night at the Idaho Center. So anyway, he came to Hannah's, and we played that tune. And on break, I said, I have to ask you, what are you playing on that tune? He goes, you really want to know? And I said, yes. He goes, boom, bop, boom, bop, boom, bop, boom, bop. That's all he's playing on that Man Like a Woman. Uh-huh. Everything else is programmed underneath it to have that ghost note slinky feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as learning it, we're playing to get the feel,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Dude, 2 hours.
I know it's been 2. I know. We're talking about streamlining this stuff, and look what happens.
Oh no.
Nobody asked any questions.
No, I think they're just too mesmerized by the story.
Yeah, that's what it is. April Fools. They're like, oh.
James, thanks for coming on today, man. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate all the support you've given me through, making drumming my full-time living.
Well, I mean, it's great to see how far you've come with it and how you built it, and proud of you for doing that. Because I remember when you were talking about it, and my biggest fear for you was I've always been footloose and fancy free to a certain extent, but you had a family you had to support.
Yeah,
and having Mary in your corner is a huge thing. To have that kind of support to allow you to jump in versus sticking your toes in the waters, so to speak.
Yeah, I had to commit 100%.
And it's great that you've done that. And I know there's been a lot of people along the way, Matt Starr, some of these people that have been coaching and all that kind of stuff. But you've done very well. It's good.
Yeah, thanks, man. A lot of it's your friendship and your mentorship along the way. And
where's my 20%?
Yeah. I'll give you 20% of the royalties of this show.
Oh, great. I'm going to owe you money.
You'll owe me money. That's how that's working. Everybody, thank you for hanging out with me and James today. We really appreciate it. Chris Park says, great stuff, guys.
Chris
for hanging out. Tom Schuster, Matt Vanderbo, Chip. I'll see Chip in 2 hours, I think. No, 3 hours, because I'll be on Drummer's Education today. Those guys need to have you on too there, James.
I think they had mentioned it at one point, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Everybody have a great day. James, thanks for hanging on. If you wait 2 seconds, I'll end this and we'll still be there. So thanks. Fred Rock School of Drumming, as modeled by my good friend James Harrison here. All right, I'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Fred.
Yeah, man.